Hello and welcome to Tech Smarter. My name is Abby Ritchie. I'm the tech guru and the host here where we talk with operators, innovators, and investors who are shaping the future of aging services. Today's episode is sponsored by Leading Age Arizona, and Tech Smarter is a production of the Smarter service. And if you are a senior living operator and you're struggling to provide consistent tech support for your residents and staff, reach out to us. We are here to help you. Go ahead and DM me on LinkedIn. I want to go ahead and invite my guest on. This is our first time. Welcome to the show, Matt Reiners.
Hello. Ooh, that was fancy. And that was a jam in the beginning for the hold music there. That was great. So much. I'm so excited to be here today, Abby. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome, Matt. Now, Matt, I know everyone knows you. People are familiar with you. You've been hosting your podcast. You've been on LinkedIn for years. But for anyone who's newer to you, could you please tell us about you and how you landed in senior living?
Of course. Gosh, I'll start back when I was born. No, I'm just kidding. So after college, I was approached by a friend who I've known my entire life. Shout out Jake Rice. He just sat in front of me in homeroom. I grew up with the kid. And he had approached me to start a company with him back in like 2012 that was basically helping people around the country throw silent disco events. You ever heard of a silent disco,
I
Abby?
have. Yeah. Yes, I have.
Fun, fun. So for those of you that don't know, a silent disco, imagine a room full of people dancing to no out loud music. Everything is being played through wireless headphones. It's the most absurd thing you'll ever come across, but there was definitely a demand that was spiking here in the States after seeing some trends in Europe. So we decided to launch our own. And we grew that business successfully year over year. And then about like year 4, year 5 into that, senior living pretty much just slapped us in our face. We started getting phone calls from senior living communities that were asking for help. They were struggling with hearing during group programs, think bingo, resident council meetings, worship services, right? Where everyone's hearing was all over the place. And they were trying to find a solution that had individual volume control designed for a group setting, which was basically a silent disco system. So Jake and I, not really knowing any better at this time, just started going into all the communities in our area, doing demos. And I remember one of the first ones was at a Kendall at Ithaca community. They used our headphones for a resident council meeting. A gentleman by the name of Vern Rockcastle, I think one of the coolest names I've heard of a resident. I've also heard Steve Steelhammer as well, Abby. I'm sure he's got some good ones too.
Love it. Love it.
But he had approached us and basically said it was the first time in 7 years of going to that meeting where he's able to hear every single word. And I think that was really just a catalyst for us as a business. And it was around that time too, and I saw my grandmother was going through, couldn't hear, wouldn't go to anything. Really, philosophy was, why bother? And so we decided to take our fun late night silent disco company and thought running one startup was so much fun. We decided to launch another company called Eversound. And we grew that successfully year over year. And then that was acquired by Uniguest in 2023. But yeah, been in the industry for about 10 years now, always around technology, innovation, and just seeming way cooler than I actually am.
I love that. That's such a great story. Personally or professionally, when I was working with clients one-on-one, and I would see how impactful it was when they couldn't hear, and then when they could hear, what a huge difference it makes. And when someone is able to engage, it changes their entire lives. And so I really applaud you for pivoting, for finding a need, and for serving people who are what I consider the best people on the planet. Yeah, 100%. We were
Yes,
recently
couldn't agree.
at Yeah, good. And for any of you that were recently at the Leading Age conference in Boston last week, I want to let you know that Matt just may be the person who got the most amount of sleep and left feeling more refreshed than anyone else, because you are a parent of a newborn, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think we're celebrating 2 months and 2 days. So it was my first time having 3 back-to-back nights of uninterrupted sleep. But I will say, my wife, who is on maternity leave right now, she's really the MVP in that. But yeah, it was funny, able to sleep throughout the night and feeling like a completely different human. So I have turned down my resolution on my camera so you can't see these huge bags underneath my eyes here.
You're looking good. You're looking good, Matt. You're pulling through. I want to ask you about some of your biggest takeaways from the Leading Age Conference. But first, if anyone's following us on LinkedIn, you may have seen that Matt stated that the first time he met me in person, I kicked him, which is totally true, mostly. Here's what I did do, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And this is what I did do with Matt.
That form, I mean, that is like impressive. I knew not to mess with you after that, Abby. So you can see my face. I'm like, holy crap! Like I will never mess with this person. So yeah.
Yeah, I see now that I'm looking, yeah, I see that. You're like, dang, not gonna mess with that one. Watch out. Well, y'all probably don't know this, but I do have a black belt in Taekwondo flex. And anytime like I am invited to spar with someone in a controlled environment, I will. So that just called my name. And then this year, I noticed rather than having a board for someone to break through, because you're like, Abby already kicked me. Instead, you had an aquarium, right? And you wanted people to dump their tech troubles in your in the harbor.
Yeah, so the running theme of this year, so I dressed up as George Washington, which is what I was telling people. Some people thought I was Paul Revere. So anytime I can find a reason to wear a wig, Abby, I'm down and I'll follow that path. But yeah, we were asking people to dump their IT woes into the Boston Harbor. And so trying to play off of the IT, and some people understood immediately. Some people had to explain it to them, which, trying to incorporate dad jokes wherever I can. So, yeah.
What would you say are some of the biggest tech woes that people were expressing?
Yeah, I would say Wi-Fi is kind of the default answer I think everybody had. I feel like everybody expects Wi-Fi to work 24/7, and when it doesn't, and it doesn't come back immediately, that can lead to a frustration. I'm right there with them on that because I definitely have that same feelings with my own Wi-Fi, or depending on where I'm at. Another one too that we saw was just like integrations, business systems not talking to one another, or they were told that they would integrate and it just didn't come out to the way that they thought. Another one was resident tech support. So, a lot of the times the corporate teams, don't get me wrong, they love their residents, they want to help, but sometimes can feel overburdened by all the technology requests that are coming in from their residents. And then sometimes some people did mention their IT team, whether they weren't the most responsive, because everyone just expects everything at a drop of a dime, right? So it's kind of cool to see. And we just basically had people write it on this paper that would disintegrate in water. And by the end of it, it was completely disgusting, probably lining up with what the actual harbor looks like. So, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I really resonate with what you said about the resident tech support and the IT departments. We're both in that business of solving this problem for communities in a professional way. What a lot of communities are doing is they're like band-aiding it in a variety of ways. And we've seen that over the past 8 years or so, especially as this issue with resident tech support evolves and residents move in with more and more devices, they need support. And so this is one way that we are professionalizing it. And I have noticed that with the Parasol Alliance that you have also noticed something really similar, which is a break fix it model with IT departments. Could you share that with us, please?
Yeah. So, and just a little bit about Parasol. So, we're owned by 5 not-for-profit senior living communities. After I resigned from my position from the company that bought us, was kind of looking out there into the world of like what was next. It really just fell in love with Parasol's vision of changing technology culture, because what we see is that technology is here to stay, right? And only technology spend is going to become more and more over the years, and like helping people to be strategic about it. Because I think a lot of the time, and I go back to this, what a CEO said to me of a provider. They said, Matt, I can't think of anything scarier than you coming in and telling me everything that's wrong with my IT, right? And
Yeah.
it's just funny to hear that because it's just setting it up to fail in one way or another. And there's so many times that we see communities are just waiting for something to break and then they'll fix it. Like we were talking to a community the other day we're like, is your Wi-Fi slow? And they're like, yes. It's like, yeah, because you have a server that's been end of life for over a decade now. So like that's just a ticking time bomb, right? So it's kind of been interesting to see of like this break fix model. I think, it doesn't allow you to prioritize what you need to prioritize. It adds a level of unpredictability and it really delays innovation, right? Like you go to leading edge, any booth you go by has some technology component in it today. And I think this break fix model doesn't allow you to be strategic and thoughtful of the technology that you're embracing and incorporating into your tech stack, but really just kind of piecemealing it together and, keeping your fingers crossed that everything works.
Yeah. Interesting. We actually look at the break fix situation a little bit differently at the Smarter Service. We liken it to the experience that we have with residents. So usually when we first start working with residents at a community, they just want us to help them with the things that are broken. Just like, can you fix this? My emails, my email's not working. Once that's been accomplished, then they start really engaging with their technology and getting more and more passionate about incorporating it into their passions and their hobbies. So it's sort of a different thing. But what we have noticed as well is that a lot of IT departments are 6 months behind in their initiatives and sometimes don't even get them accomplished because they're bogged down with resident tech support. And that piece, like you mentioned, is just going to continue to grow. So when you start working with a community, how do you begin to modernize that community's tech culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point with the residents too, I won't call him out, but I remember talking to a VP of IT about resident tech. And he was like, Matt, I love our residents, but if we go in there, we're in their room for 45 minutes trying to figure something out. And there's so many of these other things we need to like focus on and try to prioritize, which is just one of those things. And resident technology support is only going to become more and more. I don't think I was aware of how big of an opportunity it is for communities when I started at Parasol. Because we do some resident tech support stuff too, but it's one of those things that like more residents are coming in expecting some level of help with it, and it's just really been interesting to see kind of that change. Because I did not consider it until I started working here. But to your point about like tech culture, so I think this is something we always like to talk about is like the culture of a community, right? And I think too many times we see with technology culture, really it comes down to that the leadership's got to be aligned on what the technology vision is, right? Like we've gone into situations where communities like a new CEO might come in, the other CEO is there for 35 years, only wanted to do pen and paper, and that kind of trickles down, right? Like if there's not an expectation of how technology can be helpful, because I look at technology as a tool, right? You should be using it to automate the mundane, to elevate the meaningful. I would say in our industry, that meaningful is those one-on-one interactions, the relationship building, the connections with other people. So we try to go in and really how we try to gauge culture just by trying to maximize the number of conversations we have with leadership, staff, front care staff, residents. And like, it's funny to see the differences that come out in some of these conversations because the leadership team might think that they're super innovative. They've got a great technology culture. And then you go talk to some of the frontline staff or some of the other, other staff members, and they just don't feel that and just aren't seeing it. Don't see that incorporated in kind of their day to day. And they're still using pen and paper. And really
Yeah,
yeah,
I was really
go ahead.
surprised at that too, and that was 5 years ago, during COVID, and there were communities that I was working with, and I remember that their only opportunity to communicate with residents was by taping a piece of paper on their door. And that was it. That's how they were able to communicate because they didn't put the infrastructure in place to have Wi-Fi, to have an engagement platform and a way to keep residents up to date. So, I mean, that was like the biggest eye opener for me was seeing that piece missing from the communication stack.
Absolutely. And I think too, what's interesting in senior living today, and I recently saw this with one of our clients where, I think there's this interest and push to do more innovative stuff, embrace more AI, robotic process automation, right? But like there's still some foundational things that aren't being taken care of. Like, case in point, I was talking to a group the other day. the VP of IT was like, hey, I've got to call and talk to this AI company later today. And the VP in sales and marketing was like, AI, like our phone systems don't even work. Can we get our phone systems figured out before we start doing this?
Yeah.
And then to your point about Wi-Fi, like I do see that as like the foundational piece that everybody needs to invest in. There's only going to be more and more systems that are trying to get onto your network, utilize some of that bandwidth. I even look at my own house, like trying to make it a smart home, right? There's like 25, 30 things that are on the Wi-Fi at any time. And I think like when we think about technology and IT and innovation, like we need that foundational piece because that's how everything else connects to one another, right? And like too many times you hear about, it dropping in one area and you can't do certain things there. And like the residents are expecting it. It's not just a nice to have. It's going to become even more so of a need to have. And there's a Wi-Fi crisis in our industry now.
Yes, there is. There is. On at the resident level, I know I've taught a lot of resident classes on Wi-Fi connectivity, just explaining what it is and how you get on to the Wi-Fi and what happens if you can't get onto the Wi-Fi. And I would always teach this in terms of it being like it's a modern day skill. Like in the good old days, our moms taught us how to use the oven, right? And how to iron. Nowadays, like you need to know how to get on the Wi-Fi and what the little tips and tricks are in order to get yourself reconnected because it's all about the connectivity. And I want to ask you, if a community has limited budget, and they all do, what are the non-negotiable foundational technology investments that they should be looking at today?
Yeah, of course. So I think, Wi-Fi is definitely, I would say I would prioritize as number one, kind of that foundational stuff. You're looking about like $2 per square foot to get like enterprise grade wall-to-wall Wi-Fi. So definitely not cheap. We do see a lot of people planning for that in the future. I would prioritize that. I would also say too of like just basic cybersecurity infrastructure, right? Whether that's firewalls or backups and endpoint protection, because a lot of these places from what I've seen are kind of sitting targets in terms of like some of the things that they could be open to. So, we always want to have a lens of security across everything that we do. And I think a lot of people are just kind of piecemealing some of that stuff together. And then I think too of like some of the basic stuff, right? So of course your core business systems, whether that's EMR or HRIS or some of the scheduling platforms, you would want them to be like modern, look for some opportunities to be integrated and scalable to really avoid operational efficiencies. That might even be a little bit a step behind or above like kind of the foundational. But when I think of foundational, I think of like, what does the infrastructure look like to make sure that that is set up for success? And then kind of those business systems on top of that. And a big opportunity I see for communities is like who owns which business system. I think a lot of times the default answer is IT. Sometimes I've seen IT don't want to touch any of those business systems. So just making sure you're having those open and honest conversations would kind of feel, goes back into the culture where really staff should be empowered by and not burdened by technology, and really just continuing to support this culture of training, clarity, and consistent support, which will ultimately lead to consistent adoption and success.
Gotcha. How do you usually go about educating and training staff to be
Yeah.
part of
So
this solution?
yeah, great question. I think it's more so just change management versus like, I will say implementation's key. There's been a lot of, I know, successful technology platforms out there that have had a crappy implementation and everyone thinks it sucks. Right. So I do think those are things that you need to kind of imagine. And like, I remember I had someone on my podcast, shout out Dylan Painter of Priority Life Care, who talked about kind of the process they take because they have to think about it from, the different, like the what's in it for me as you're going through the training, but then how do you approach somebody that might have a different learning style, might be in a different age bracket, might have a different cultural background. So there's all these things you kind of need to take in consideration. When I think about the training aspect, it's more so of casting the vision and trying to formulate it to that individual of how it's going to make their job hopefully easier. Because that should be the goal of any technology, is to make your job easier in the long run.
Yes, and training more people internally to be able to run those systems, I think is crucial. I've seen firsthand how a lot of communities, because of the high level of turnover with the staff, they have like orphaned tech. The person who was here used to know how to run it, but no one knows how to run it anymore. Or we see over and over that only about 10% of an engagement platform's features are actually being used and utilized. So the more that there's an education and a continuous customer success support team in place, I've found the better it is for the community overall.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I've definitely seen that run into that situation on the other side where we might have a target contact leave, we reach out and they're like, I have no idea what this technology does, right? So it's like, how
Yeah.
do you kind of build that? And then I've seen too with some of like more of the resident engagement stuff of creating kind of a resident committee where people feel empowered to talk about it internally and then like help one another with it. I've seen that be very successful as well. So as much as it's the staff, some of the technology in there, just making sure the residents feel confident about it and encouraging them, because I think too many times as technology companies, we're not thinking about the resident, even though our technology is for the resident sometimes. So it's like, how do you incorporate them into the onboarding, into the training, and into the implementation to just add to that level of stickiness?
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I agree 100%. I know many communities have a resident tech
Mhm.
committee, for
Yeah.
instance, which is really helpful, and many skilled and educated folks ready to step in. Um, when we were at the conference, I was interviewing people on the floor, thought leaders like yourself, about tech innovations that a resident can anticipate in the upcoming future. And I heard so much about AI, 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 and so I'd love to know from you, what are two specific real world examples of how AI is currently being used by senior living communities?
Yeah, great question. And I think so many times we hear people saying they want to use AI, but then you're like, well, how do you want to use it? And they're like, I don't know. So it's like, so when I think about AI, there's really, and we've identified 5 pillars that we see like AI, and I'll just touch on 2 of them here. But like we have a free AI guidebook. Feel free. I know we'll share the website at the end here, but definitely go and download that. But where we see like the biggest opportunity for AI in the short term is in a couple of specific buckets, right? And they're easy buckets, right? Like meeting note takers. So many times we hear about all these different committees that might be there, board meetings, taking all that. There's different platforms out there. Whether you might be using something on Zoom like Read AI or some of the Zoom, the one built in, you might be using something like Plod, which like right now I'm recording my answers, not so much you, Abby, because I have the headphones on, but just recording my answers so I can get all the transcript and think through like what future LinkedIn post, all that stuff will look like. But meeting note takers, I see is like kind of a easy bucket for people to think about where they can use AI today and kind of like quickly check that box for that. And then I think too, as you look at AI, another one, um, all these tech vendors are talking about AI and their own solutions and like where they're being successful with it. So I would look for it in your current business systems. Some it's already incorporated into what you're doing. Some are charging you a premium to what to embrace. But I think it goes back to like what problem you're trying to solve and then trying to find a solution from there. I think another really cool thing about AI, there's resident engagement platforms out there that will now do like scoring based on interviews to kind of figure out what mutual likes might be to try to incorporate residents together. Because I think when I think of senior living, I think of the living aspect, right? And I think to make people happy, you need to find people that you would kind of compare to like yourself and like find your people. And I think some of these AI platforms out there are able to do that. And then I just got a quick rant about AI if you're down for it, Abby.
Let's hear it. Bring it.
All right. So I think AI is the buzziest of buzzwords right now. Too many people are talking about it and not getting in the weeds. When I think about AI, it's really in 2 buckets. So one, how do I use it to become like the best performing individual I can become? So like whether you're using ChatGPT forms that I would use for that. I use Riverside for my podcast. I use Beautiful AI for presentations. There's a Read AI. There's a slew. So like, how do I become the best performing individual? I see that's much more short term. Like, how do I become the greatest chief growth officer at Parasol Alliance and using some of the tools out there to automate the mundane and elevate the meaningful? What I see is more of like a mid to long term is this team AI, right? Like, because to your point of like, how do we train everybody on this? How do we get everybody to use it? I see that as more mid to long term because there's all these varying tech appetites, and we're never going to get to the team one if you don't start embracing AI in your personal life. Like I have AI help me create grocery lists, shopping, like recipes, gift ideas for my kids, right? Like there's just so many different ways that you can use it. I'm still in the first year of house ownership. Between YouTube and ChatGPT, I feel like I could do anything around here. So yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, that's so funny. Have you been trimming anyone's hair lately? Have you watched any YouTube videos on cutting hair?
Well, now you're just rubbing it in my face, Abby. Not cutting hair, but definitely of like trying to like braid my daughter's hair. Granted, she won't let me touch it because I pull it a little bit too hard. But yeah, so definitely like on that side of it though.
So funny. Yeah, there's a lot that can be learned from it. Let's shift. Let's talk about some of the talent and the IT workforce. It's such a competitive labor market, and do you know of any ways that a community can use modern, efficient technology to help them attract and retain younger staff members?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I think, and I remember seeing someone talk about this a couple of years ago at one of the conferences where they were kind of comparing two interview processes. They're comparing McDonald's to the senior living community down the road. McDonald's, they're able to text a number, do like a video interview, and know within like 30 minutes if they were hired or not. The senior living took a couple weeks to get back to schedule, and then there's a couple of follow-up things. So I think it's like,
Ah,
like how are you taking people through the interview process? Because the assumption they're not just applying with you, right? They're applying with all these other places to try to find their first job. So like really taking a step back and looking at what your interview process is. I also think too, this industry needs to do a better job telling its story. There's so many websites you can go on and it's the same stock images, but there's so many stories, so much life, so much just amazingness in these communities. And what are you doing to really capture those stories and share them with the world? So I think there's a couple of things that they can do there, but it's really, and then like in terms of retain, it's like, what does that ladder look like? Like, where do they want to go? Right. Like there's so many people I find in this industry kind of just slap them in the face. And what can we do as a better career, just try to help people understand this community and this industry more early on and all the opportunities. I was like, when I talk to college classes, I always say like, this is like business with soul, right? Like you can do really anything and everything you want. You're not just, trying to optimize the way one truck gets to another or optimize the widget. It's like really impacting quality of life in people's lives. And you can like, if you have a soul, I feel like this is a great industry. And just coming back to that, right? The why, and then like making sure that you are being technology forward and you're thinking to try to get it to a level that's acceptable to more.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that to the forefront. I also think that senior living is an industry with soul, 100%. I've met so many people who have been moved and touched by an older adult, whether it's been personally or professionally, and then they just want to improve the lives of those living within communities. So thank you for mentioning that. That is a beautiful thing and very helpful. I want to ask you one final question. How does Parasol ensure new technology doesn't simply add another layer of administrative tasks to caregivers?
Yeah, great question. So really what we find, and so like the way that we work with our clients, we're more so running the RFPs for them to try to figure out the best solution for them. I do think as we're thinking about this, we try to optimize business applications and workflows. When we work with clients, we're not just trying to like rip and replace and get them the latest and greatest. We're trying to really optimize what they're doing today, what people are already used to. Like one of our number one projects is like an EHR optimization, right? Which definitely takes a while, but like, how are we optimizing your point click care instance to really just make life easier? How are we reducing the amount of clicks it takes to get from beginning to end? Looking for those opportunities to eliminate duplication, paper, and some of those redundant systems, right? Like we try to look for opportunities where it should simplify and not add steps. And really, like one of the things that we work with communities on a strategic roadmap, and we include frontline staff's input in those just to ensure that tech choices reflect real operational needs. And what we find, if we can align like the IT technology innovation along with the care goals, we ensure that technology is enhancing caregiving, whether it's through automation, alerts, or documentation efficiency. So I think it's a multifaceted approach, But at the end of the day, we find it's just like maximizing the conversations and not trying to make decisions behind a closed door and then release it to the world and say, here you go. And people are like, I don't really need this. So try to incorporate their feedback and making sure that they feel included in the process and then go from there.
Great answer. Thank you. Matt, I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your insight. If someone wants to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so definitely look me up on LinkedIn. I'm probably the easiest person to get a hold of, for better or for worse. Anybody can book 15 minutes right on my LinkedIn profile. Just click book a meeting and one of the buttons. And then if they want to check out Parasol Alliance, you can just go to parasolalliance.com. We've got a Raising Tech podcast on there. I have another podcast, which we're going to have Abby on soon. But yeah, I'm probably the easiest person to find. It's my gift and my curse. I'll be the first to admit that. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, conspiracy theories, we can get into it. I'm down.
Awesome. Okay. I'll be tracking some of those conspiracy theories and maybe we'll talk about them when I'm on your podcast. Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. And for those of you who are joining us in the chat and participating, we want to thank our listeners for joining us today. We love hearing from you. So if there is a guest that you would like to have on the show, please let me know. And just want to thank you all. And we will be back here with you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.